Hello again, Yinzers, Yinzettes. Welcome to episode 4 of Pucks and Nat, where we bring you the latest downtime breakdowns of everything Penguins hockey. And we're going to talk about this week. It's been quite a good week for the Penguins, and we'll talk about that, some early returns on the Tomasino trade, as well as Four Nations since the rosters were revealed. And we're also going to talk about a new emerging line for the Penguins that's been bringing them pretty good early returns as well. So stick around. We'll talk about all that, much more. Nat. What's up, everybody? How you doing today on this fine Wednesday afternoon? Coming to you a little bit later than we normally do, but welcome back. Glad you're tuning in on a weekly basis every Wednesday. I'm one of your hosts, Kelsey Surmatz. In case you're unfamiliar, in case this is your first time listening, you can find my writing and all my stuff on the Hockey News Pittsburgh Penguins website. You can also find me on X at Kelsey_Surmatz4. Same thing for threads there. And then for Blue Sky, it's the same thing without the underscore. And once again, I am joined by my co-host, Hannah Kirkel.
Hi, everybody. Like Kelsey said, I'm Hannah Kirkel. I'm a contributor to the Sporting News, so that's where you can find my work. You can find me on Twitter at H_Kirk6. You can find me on Blue Sky at HKirk6, no underscore, and you can find me on Threads at Kirkel6. So let's get into the week, Kelsey. It's was a little bit of a surprising week for the Penguins, I would say. In terms of opponents faced, you look, you see Vancouver, you see Boston, and Calgary this year has been very hot. You see the reigning Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. You definitely don't expect to go 4-0, do you?
No, you do not, but here we are.
Here we are.
The Penguins did go 4-0 this week, and that actually started last Wednesday after our Wednesday episode last week. They played Vancouver, and that was a bit of a game of ups and downs for them, but they did
for sure.
Yeah. But they came away with the 5-4 win there. And we'll talk about it in a few seconds. This guy a little bit more anyway, but Blake Lizotte registered yet another goal for the Penguins, and more on him again, like I said, later. And then Rickard Rakell, Kevin Hayes, Brian Rust twice added scores for the Penguins. So, another example of a game where they surrender 3 late goals. They made it very interesting, but they did hold on, and they got a good effort from Tristan Jarry in that one too.
They certainly made it interesting, as they always like to. And then on Friday, the Penguins went to Boston and came out with the win. Things weren't looking so hot through the first 2 periods. Couple minutes into the game, Penguins defense shows up again. Charlie Coyle completely alone beats Tristan Jarry, but
they buckled down.
They did buckle down. I mean, not to say they completely stopped giving up high danger chances, because, well, that would just go against team identity, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
But they did score with 0.8 seconds to go in the second period. And then Philip Tomasino, new Penguin, gave him the go-ahead goal, and they did not concede another.
Absolutely. And, that goal at the end of the second period was huge for them. Really, really nice pass by Crosby to feed Rakell right in front of the net there. And, that goal really gave them some momentum going into that third period. But regardless, that was probably the best defensive effort I've seen from the Penguins all season long.
100% agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was a different kind of game, lately, and we've seen this in the advanced stats too. The Penguins actually aren't a bad team in terms of expected goals. They're actually right up there with the elite teams. But the problem has been finishing. And, in their wins this year, we've seen a lot where they're just outscoring opponents and kind of holding on. And, they'll give up a few late ones, sometimes surrender the lead as we've seen and we'll talk about in a second, but other times they're kind of just outscoring opponents. Whereas in this game, they were able to win a tightly contested defensive game against Boston. So, and again, Tristan Jarry was phenomenal in that Boston game. That was, I think, probably his best game of the season. And he continues to trend up for the Penguins too. Goaltending has kind of been a big story for them lately.
Speaking of, good defensive games where you only get 2 goals, but they're good. Let's talk about the 6-2 win over the Calgary Flames. Honestly, I think that was the most fun I've had watching the Penguins all year, just in terms of they played fun hockey.
Yeah, it was.
It wasn't the most defensively sound hockey, as they did surrender 2 late goals, but all's well that ends well. They won. I had fun. That's really all that matters.
Yeah, and it's something I really liked about that game in particular too. And again, we'll talk about this more, but they're seeing scoring from up and down their lineup. And Philip Tomasino added another goal in that game. And in terms of the early returns on the Tomasino trade, I mean, it was the same thing. We'll get to Tuesday's game as well. Kind of want to save some of the talk for that, but he's made a really good early impression so far. He had those 2 goals in consecutive games. The second one in the Calgary game was on the power play, and we also saw 3 power play goals from the second unit in that Calgary game, which
at this point should just be the first unit, honestly.
Yeah, it's and the thing is, you don't want to break up a good thing, so I wouldn't even touch that unit. What I do like about how they've been deploying the power play in recent games is that it seems like there's a lot more even deployment between the first and second units. Before, we'd see the first unit get about a minute and a half out there. That's not really the case anymore. I think they're changing a little sooner. And I think the first power play unit as a whole is still operating at a pretty good level. It's been a little bit shaky. But you don't want to mess up a good thing with that second unit. As long as they're being deployed out there more, I don't have a problem with them kind of just keeping that rolling. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, Blake Lizotte added another goal, and he has 4 on the season so far. And again, that's something we're going to talk about in a little bit as well. But, I'm liking the early returns from these young, high upside change of scenery forwards that Kyle Dubas has been acquiring in Tomasino and Lizotte. So, kind of skipping ahead, that brings us to last night's game against Florida. And
what a game that was.
And a completely different experience here, wasn't it? It wasn't a fun game like Calgary, but it was an interesting one.
It was very similar to the Vancouver game, honestly. I mean,
yeah.
They blew a 4-1 lead. Florida tied it. Let's just start at the beginning of the game. First off, the disallowed goal. I mean, it went from being 1-0 Panthers to being 2-0 Penguins, as we all expected. Just a strange game, start to finish, because even when the Penguins were leading 4-1, they weren't the better team in any way, shape, or form. Not for a minute, not for a second in that game. The Florida Panthers are the reigning Stanley Cup champions for a reason. They outplayed the Penguins for 63 and a half minutes.
Yeah.
It's just that poor Spencer Knight wasn't having a good night.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I mean, a few things too. It's the Penguins were very opportunistic in that game, and Mike Sullivan even said that after. I mean, they were outshot 41-16.
Yeah.
Tristan Jarry was absolutely peppered in that game, and once again, it was a pretty strong effort from him. He kind of kept them in the game on these, pretty strong assaults by Florida, especially in the third period. And they did score 3 goals in the third period to tie the game. But that was after I again, just in terms of some other things going on here. So Owen Pickering scored his first NHL goal. He opened the scoring off of a really good shift from the third line. Blake Lizotte kind of made that play happen by hustling to the corner, beating Florida to the puck, poking it to the point, and Pickering kind of put a seeing eye shot through. Evgeny Malkin scored just a minute and 12 seconds later.
Great feed from Tomasino, by the way.
Great feed from Tomasino. And I think this is a good time to talk about Tomasino because, the early returns on this guy are impressive. I'm watching this guy, and even when he's not scoring, he's making things happen on the ice. He's such a smart player. Even on that play to Malkin, everybody's talking about the little touch pass, the no look touch pass to Malkin of, Drew O'Connor, Tomasino, Malkin. But what I was impressed with on that particular play is his play right at the offensive blue line. He had 2 or 3 Florida players converging on him, and he somehow really quickly shuffled the puck up to Drew O'Connor and then immediately started driving the middle of the ice parallel to Evgeny Malkin. Drew O'Connor saw the opportunity. He fed Tomasino, and then there was that no look touch pass to Gino. Gino puts it home. I've just been really impressed by this guy so far, and I cannot believe that Kyle Dubas got him for a 2027 4th round pick.
Yeah. Just going back to that 2027 4th round pick for a second. Kyle Dubas won that trade unless, the Nashville Predators select the next Wayne Gretzky with that 2027 4th overall pick. Because in 4 games with the Penguins, Tomasino has 2 goals, both of them game winners. That's crazy.
No goals before he came to the Penguins too, so.
And then he has that assist, and that was a really big assist because Evgeny Malkin hadn't scored since the Washington Capitals game in early November. So that's a big goal, big assist. Philip Tomasino, welcome to the Pittsburgh Penguins. You're doing just fine.
Yeah, and just one more mark about Tomasino too. I think, which I do want to say too, at the beginning of the third, Marcus Pettersson scored this power forward goal.
He scores one of them every 2 years, and it leaves you wondering, where's this in the other 81 games of the season, Marcus? But
yeah, am I watching Marcus Pettersson or am I watching Paul Coffey? It was a great goal. But anyways, kind of transitioning back to Tomasino a little bit. I think another, important factor of bringing Tomasino into the fold is that with, the emergence of Tomasino on that second line with Malkin, it has allowed the Penguins to drop Michael Bunting to the third line. They kind of switched Drew O'Connor and Michael Bunting 3 games ago. And I'll tell you what, that was one of the best moves, lineup moves that Sullivan's made in recent memory, because that third line looks like a legitimate third line for the Penguins. And just so far, go ahead, sorry.
It really does. No, I have some stats here.
Yeah.
Since that Boston game when it was switched. But again, that was about halfway through the Boston game. So let's just look back at the past 2 games. You've got Michael Bunting. He had a goal and 2 assists against Calgary. Blake Lizotte had a goal and an assist against Calgary and 2 assists against Florida. And then Anthony Beauvillier had a goal against Calgary. I mean, every single member of that BLT, nicknamed by Colby Armstrong, line scored against Calgary in their first full game together. That's the markings of a good line.
Yeah, and actually, too, I do want to clarify because I guess Dan Potach named it the BLT line, and then he talked to Colby after, and Colby wanted to change it to the Killer Bees line because he was saying that, he was getting complaints from New York Rangers fans about copying the BLT thing. But I'm pretty sure the Killer Bees was a
BLT
little
is a sandwich.
copycatted.
What do you mean copying the
Yeah,
BLT thing?
it's also semantic. I don't care
It's
what
a
Rangers
sandwich.
fans think.
There is no
but
patent on the BLT sandwich. Oh,
yeah, but I guess
whatever.
Colby's committed to calling them the Killer Bees now because he doesn't
Whatever
want to use
we're calling
BLT,
them, they're great. They look good. They're fast. They're scoring.
Yeah, I think BLT is better though. And
Yeah.
Stone Cold Sid, shout out to a little meme he made, pasting their faces on bacon, lettuce, and
God.
tomatoes. It
Every
was
time I see
fantastic.
that, I die. Looks like the Wiggles with Michael Bunce's face.
It was wonderful. But yeah, I mean, this line and just, those 8 points in 3 games, 2.5 games, really, 3 goals, 5 assists in 2.5 games. But just in general, too, I mean, we've seen what they can do on the offensive side of the puck. They were really, really influential in 2 of the goals against Florida. So on Owen Pickering's goal, I mentioned it earlier, they had a nice cycling forecheck going in the offensive zone. Blake Lizotte beats Florida player with his speed to the corner, feeds it up to Pickering. Pickering scores. And then they were also influential on Letang's goal as well, as that was, the result of another hardworking shift by that line. They had some sustained possession time in the offensive zone on that one too. But offensive side, I mean, I think people might be overlooking the defensive side of things as well because it is a small sample size. It's only been 2.5 games, as we mentioned. But in terms of expected goals against, they're at 0.7, which is the lowest mark of any line on the Penguins this season that spent more than 20 minutes together. And they're also the lowest in expected goals against per 60 with 1.61. And again, this is a small sample size. It's a little bit early to be looking at the advanced stats and the analytics, but the early returns are really good. And having that line as a legitimate two-way threat, which they have been so far. I mean, I know before the Florida game, I asked Mike Sullivan about the job Blake Lizotte's been doing as a third line center there. And I mentioned that he had 4 goals in 10 games at the time. And Sully just kind of smiles and is like, he's on a 40 goal pace for us. Well, if he can keep that up, that's great. And, it's impressive what they've been able to do in this short sample size. And if they can continue the work that they're doing in both zones and all 3 zones, could be a really big thing for the Penguins.
Listen, as I said, Blake Lizotte would win the Rocket Richard if only his teammates would just stop shooting the puck at his head. Yeah, like you said, he's got 4 goals through 11 games played. He's got 3 assists, and he's a +3, which I know. Plus minus is, it's a fraudulent stat. Whatever. Look at this Penguins team. Anyone who's a plus anything is crazy. Yeah, I mean, he's been really great. He works his tail off every single shift. He's fast. He's play driving center. This third line is a very nice fit for him.
Absolutely. And I think that third line center position looks really good on him so far too. I mean, and we see him and Beauvillier able to beat opponents with their speed. They're really good at cycling the puck, forechecking, and then Bunting does what he does best and goes to the net and kind of provides that grit. So it's been a really good line for the Penguins. And just as a side note too, with Lizotte, and this is also just in a small sample size on his season so far, he is second in average game score behind. Actually, no, he's first in average game score with 1.01. And he's also first in defense rating with 1.1 on the Penguins. So, I mean, this guy's providing offense. This guy's providing defense. They may have found their third line center. And that's a really big development for them. But yeah, just want to transition a little bit. So it is time for trending up and trending down.
Kelsey.
So, Hannah. Oh, I was going to have you start today. You want to start today? Or do you want me to
really.
start?
I kind of feel like I'm about to pass out. It's your turn. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
I'm really sick. This is the longest I've been awake, in a straight shot since Saturday night.
We appreciate your commitment to the podcast, Hannah. And
Oh, yeah.
we have promised to keep this one a little shorter. And I think we're doing a pretty good job so
We
far.
are. So far, so good. But I have definitely seen better days. Anyway, Kelsey, I am certainly not trending up, but who is trending up for you?
Yeah, my player trending up is Rickard Rakell. So, all right, yeah. So, Hannah and I have a little bit differing opinions on Rickard Rakell, but I think, just this season, I think Rakell's been pretty much trending up the entire season, especially if you compare it to last season, where, I mean, he was injured most of the season. We're finally seeing him healthy. And, he said on multiple occasions, Sully's mentioned this as well, that he worked on his foot speed over the summer, his acceleration. And I think that's paying off for him. Because he is leading the team in goals with 10. He has 16 points on the season. He looks like a fit with Crosby and Rust on that first line, and he was also a fit with Malkin earlier this season. But I want to dig into some of the stats too, because the offensive stats are going to kind of be mixed in here too. But I want to talk more about his defense, because I think his defensive game is something that is sometimes overlooked, and should probably deserves a little bit more credit than it's getting. He is third among forwards in block shots for the Penguins, and that's behind only Noel Acciari and Drew O'Connor, who are both regular penalty killers, mind you. Acciari has 34, O'Connor has 30, Rakell has 28. So Rakell's behind two players that regularly kill penalties and block shots. He's also second in net rating with 2.0, behind only Sidney Crosby, who's at 2.2. He's third in average game score at 0.82, behind Blake Lizotte and Sid. He's fifth in offensive rating, and he's second in defense rating among all skaters on the Penguins. He's at 0.5. Lizotte's the only one ahead of him at 1.1. All these stats are courtesy of Hockey Stat Cards. Check them out if you haven't. But, I talked to Sully about this today, just asked him about, Rakell's defensive game. And he said that, this is a guy that's playing well in both zones right now. He had a huge block shot against Florida that led directly to Pettersson's goal. He blocked a shot in the defensive zone in the slot. While still on the ice, he kind of floated a puck in the air to Crosby to start the breakout. And then, what happened with Pettersson's goal ensued. So I think this guy's playing well in all three zones. He has really impressed lately. So the offense is trending back up again as well. I just think this is a guy that probably deserves a little bit more credit for his all-around play than he's gotten. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I also believe he should have been on Team Sweden's Four Nation roster.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that later. All right. Anything you want to add there, or do you just want to jump right into your trending up player?
No, I think you covered that.
All right. Who's trending up, Hannah?
That would be Brian Rust. So I was debating. I was kind of toggling back and forth between Rust and Crosby. Crosby's also been great in these last 4 games. He's got 5 assists. He's up to just under a point per game, which is the goal. But Brian Rust has been really great. He had those 2 goals against Vancouver. He had the game winner in overtime against Florida last night to stop what would have been a crushing loss. Because if you go up 4-1, even if you're being outplayed all night, if you give up a 4-1 lead and you blow that and you lose that game, mentally, I'm not sure you can really recover from that. Just in terms of confidence and play, that would have been pretty brutal. But yeah, he's got 3 goals and 2 assists in his last 4. He's driving play. He's even looking a little bit better defensively, which is good because he did not have the greatest start to the year in terms of defense. But it looks like he's, putting that behind him. Hopefully that continues, but that's really all I got. Brian Rust, he's trending up.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that whole first line is really starting to come to fruition. I was kind of skeptical about it the first couple games, but I said this before, they were the best 5-on-5 line for the Penguins last season. And we're starting to see kind of them gel together again. And again, with the addition of Philip Tomasino, I don't think the coaching staff feels as pressure to separate Rust and Raquel, who are their top scoring wingers. So it's nice to just see the top six starting to come together. And Russ has been a big part of that because he's definitely playing better defensively. I know we've talked about that before on here, but I agree. All right. So
who's trending down, Kelsey?
Trending down is Matt Nieto.
Oh, that was the wrong one. Hold up. Let me do that again.
Trending down is Matt Nieto.
Ow!
I think both are kind of appropriate here. I think we could use either, but still a fan of the second one. Anyway, Matt Nieto. So I think in this situation, I do want to clarify something up front here. I see a lot of discourse about, the Penguins not playing these younger players, playing guys like Matt Nieto, Noel Acciari on the fourth line. What I want to say and preface all of this with is that I think there's a lot of people that miss, what the purpose of a fourth line is. Because, guys like Noel Acciari, Matt Nieto, if you look at advanced stats, if you look at advanced analytics, chance generation metrics, they're not going to be great numbers. And they usually aren't for fourth lines in the National Hockey League. The purpose of a fourth line, and especially for this Penguins team, which Mike Sullivan has iterated this several times, is to take away the tough minutes from their top guys. So this line is being deployed in defensive situations. They're expected to stop the puck from going into the net, and play sound defensively. And when they're spending most of their 5-on-5 minutes in the defensive zone, that's not going to be very conducive to having a high rate of chance generation. So
obviously they're not going to have a high goal share.
No. So, I want to put that whole thing to bed because, you stick someone like Valtteri Puustinen, you stick someone even like Jesse Puljujarvi, which I'll kind of get to in a second here. You stick those guys on the fourth line. They're role they're playing on that line isn't going to be conducive to what makes them successful because that fourth line is expected to take away those tough minutes and play in defensive situations.
Valtteri Puustinen isn't going to lead the team in blocked shots.
No.
That's just not the player he is, and it's not the player Jesse Puljujarvi is either.
It is the player Noel Acciari is.
Yeah, exactly. That's the player Noel Acciari is. That's the player Matt Nieto is. They're going to block shots. They're going to play defense. They're going to be in their own zone for the entire game. But if they keep the puck out of the net and they, again, like you said, take those tough minutes away from the top players, they're doing their job. They're not supposed to score 15 goals a year. They're just supposed to play defense, block shots, play on the penalty kill, and make it so that Sidney Crosby isn't playing 30 minutes a night. That's their purpose. Valtteri Puustinen, Jesse Puljujarvi, that's not what they're meant to do. That's not what they would not do well in that role is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, I do want to get into this trending down here. So I think just in terms of trending down with Nieto, I'm not going to delve too much into the numbers. He is tied for the lowest average game score on the team with Valtteri Puustinen this season, which doesn't look great for him. And I do think his game in a general sense has been trending down since those first couple games he came back. I do think, that first week or so that he returned from injured reserve after a year of not playing hockey, he looked pretty steady in there. But I guess my argument for him trending down now is just that we're not seeing enough of what he brings in particular. and those things. I just think there's better options right now. So Cody Glass was activated off injured reserve on Saturday. He still was classified as day-to-day. So, I mean, they're going to have some lineup decisions to make here. But I guess in this case, so you're relying on your fourth line to play those tough minutes, to play in those defensive situations. Any offense from that line is a bonus. But I think somebody like Glass, especially, kind of provides that bonus while also still providing the same kinds of things that Nieto brings to the lineup. Glass kills penalties.
Yeah, I agree. Cody Glass, like you said, he kills penalties. He's defensively responsible. And does he bring less offensively to the table than maybe Jesse Puljujarvi would? Maybe a little, but he does enough defensively to warrant him getting that spot on the fourth line because that's what a fourth line is supposed to do.
Yeah. And I personally, I don't think it hurts. Obviously with Glass back in the fold, I think he's going to get some games in here. I would think that he's probably going to be more of a regular on that fourth line. And Nieto's probably going to slot out a little bit anyway. He has been getting the lowest amount of minutes on the team in recent games. So that's kind of something to keep an eye on. But I wouldn't mind them slotting Puljujarvi in, for a couple games here and there, to keep his legs fresh. And also, I mean, as long as I don't want to hear anything about sitting Noel Chari, that should not happen at all. So, assuming that Noel Chari is still in the lineup, I don't think it hurts to slot in Puljujarvi next to him and Hayes or him and Glass for a game, whoever it's going to be. Because, I think there's some offensive upside that you still want to get out of Puljujarvi, and maybe he gets an opportunity again with injuries and stuff in the top nine. But I definitely think in terms of just where everything's trending, Nieto's probably going to, I would presume he should probably come out of the lineup in favor of Glass as soon as Glass is ready. And if I had to guess, I think Glass might be ready for Friday's game against New York. So we'll see. But that's my player trending down. I'm sorry, I mispronounced that. But Hannah, who is your player trending down?
That would be Ryan Shea.
Ow!
The Penguins' third pairing has not been good this year. It hasn't. Now, I say that, of course, with the exception of Owen Pickering, who has been great in a very small sample size. I was more so talking about the pairing of Jack St. Ivany and Ryan Shea. But with Jack St. Ivany getting sent back down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, that leaves Ryan Shea, who is not doing great. Let's just talk about Ryan Shea for a second. He's got 12 games played. One nice thing about Shea, he's got 17 blocked shots, and that is 5.42 blocked shots per 60, which I feel like that's pretty crazy, right? That's pretty crazy.
That's a pretty high number, yeah.
Now into the bad things. Notice that the good things were very short. He's got 4 takeaways to 13 giveaways. 7 of those giveaways come in the defensive zone. Not great. He's got a negative 0.5 offensive rating. He's got a negative 0.5 defensive rating. I get them again on hockey stat cards. I mean, he doesn't look like an NHL caliber defenseman right now. His decision making isn't great. He's not reading well. Like, he's not making the right defensive reads. He was on for at least 2 of the goals in the Panthers game and was very close to, if not the defining factor in those goals. He's just, I see no reason why Ryan Shea is seeing the ice and Ryan Graves is up in the press box still. I know how bad Brian Graves was last year. Like, I watched the games. But this year, he has certainly performed better than that, with the exception of the Columbus game, where no one played well. And I'm just not so sure why he isn't given a chance to slide in on that third pair over Shea, who is not bringing really much to the table.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. And I was actually just trying to look for something here too. I do know against Calgary, Jack St. Ivany and Ryan Shea combined for 8 giveaways. I think it was against Calgary.
That's good.
So
that's what you
yeah.
want to see from the third pairing.
Yeah. So that wasn't great. But I mean, another thing too, it's one of those things with Ryan Graves up in the press box, and I do think that something might factor in here is who can play their offside, because right now the Penguins only have 2 right shot defensemen on their roster with Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang. So I mean, they have 5 left shot defensemen, 2 right shot defensemen. I think that might be a factor just only because Shea has played both sides. But I think if you're taking the results of these last 4 games and you insert Ryan Graves in there instead of Ryan Shea, I think you get the same result. I don't think Ryan Graves in no way, shape, or form has been worse than Ryan Shea or Jack St. Ivany this season. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that.
No. Yeah, I totally agree with you there.
Yeah. Well, I can't find the giveaway stats for Florida. I don't think it was too bad. Yeah, that's okay.
Let's just know in our hearts that they probably weren't awesome.
Well, actually,
maybe
only
they
had
weren't
one
as
giveaway
bad as
against
Calgary,
Florida.
but
yeah, they only had one giveaway against Florida. Shea did. But yeah, I think it was the Calgary game that they had 8. It was either that or the Boston game, but I'm fairly certain it was Calgary. Maybe it was Vancouver. I don't know. This whole last week is blurring together. Just know that in one of those games, Jack St. Ivany and Ryan Shea. Oh no! You know what? It would have been the Vancouver game because St. Ivany didn't play in the Calgary game. So yeah, it was the Vancouver game. They had combined for 8 giveaways. So that should tell you all you need to know. And I believe Ryan Shea had 5 of those. So yeah, it's been rough sledding for him.
Yeah, he's trending down.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we only have a couple minutes here. We do want to talk about 4 nations real quick because the Sweden and Finland rosters were announced earlier today. Canada's was kind of leaked. I think we can kind of expect what USA is going to be.
We all know what Canada's is going to be, give or take one
USA.
person.
Yeah.
Same with Team USA, honestly.
Yeah. And honestly, too, I mean, by the time you actually see this or hear this, the rosters might be announced already. So we apologize.
Will have. I think Team Canada's is getting announced in about 16 minutes. So
yeah. So anyway, we're probably a little late on that, but we can project what they're going to be. In terms of the 4 nations rosters, though, I think Canada and USA is going to be about what you expect. I don't think there's going to be any super big surprises there.
No.
The one surprise I do have with Canada a little bit is apparently the omission of Evan Bouchard. I thought for sure that, apparently.
Are you telling me that Evan Bouchard was left off of Team Canada?
That's the word on the street, yes. Yeah. Right now, what was apparently, the projected roster, Hannah is laughing on camera in case you're listening.
Keeping it very professional. Keep talking, Kelsey.
No, it's all good. So apparently, from what's been leaked, and again, if you hear this later and we're wrong, we apologize. We filmed this before.
God, I'm gonna get so flamed.
But it was it was Taves, Makar, Theodore, Pietrangelo, Morrissey, Parayko, and Sanheim for defensemen on Team Canada.
Yeah, so. Okay. I would have at least put Bouchard as the 7th forward, maybe, but I understand why they wouldn't. I mean, Parayko, he's a good shutdown defender. Also, so is Evan Bouchard, obviously.
Yeah.
No, I get it. You don't want to have too many cooks with Makar and Pietrangelo and even Sanheim. He's not too bad. He's not shabby offensively or anything.
Yeah. You're just it's incredulous. You're just like beside yourself right now.
God. Oh, this is okay.
Yeah,
Anyway.
we'll just okay. We'll just leave it at that because I don't.
We'll just leave it at that.
It's just to me that one's inexplicable. Again, if true, that's what's been leaked.
I think it's pretty explicable, honestly.
Yeah. And then I think Finland. Finland's pretty much what I expected. I don't think there's any real surprises with that roster.
I kind of expected maybe Eli Tolvanen to make the roster. And Yanni Hakanpää making it was a little bit of a surprise just because he hasn't really played this year. Not so sure about injury status, but it's not like there were any glaring omissions or anything.
And I do think in some of these cases, especially with just like guys who haven't played much or guys who have been injured, a lot of this is based on merit too. I mean, and past performance. So that's understandable to a certain extent. And I did actually, my co-editor wrote about a month ago a piece, and this is when Joel Blomqvist was, up with the Penguins and playing well. He thought that he may have had a shot at one of those spots. But
no.
At this point, no way.
Not even if he was still with the Penguins and playing extremely well, that would still be a long shot.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you.
Really, other than Erik Karlsson and Sidney Crosby, who were, of course, named to their respective teams when this thing was announced, I think that pretty much all of the Penguins were going to be a long shot. Maybe Raquel or Pettersson, maybe Tristan Jarry, if only because of Canada's weakness in the goaltending area. But
yeah,
I think it was kind of a long shot anyway.
Yeah. See, I do think Raquel probably deserved a spot on that roster over Victor Arvidsson.
I agree that Victor Arvidsson snubbed someone, but I don't think it was Raquel. I think it was William Eklund of the San Jose Sharks. He's second on the team in scoring. He's got 23 points in 27 games. He's 22 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think Eklund was snubbed a little bit here too. And I think my personal opinion, I get why Nyquist is on the roster. He's a defensively responsible forward. He kills penalties, but Raquel is also defensively responsible forward. He provides much more on offense. Nyquist has 6 goals, 4 assists this season. Raquel has 10 goals, 6 assists. Arvidsson is at 2 goals, 3 assists. He's only played 16 games, but if we're being
with Nyquist, look up and down that Nashville Predators roster. I'm so sorry.
All good.
And tell me who isn't performing like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I understand what you're saying, but Nyquist on a team like that in such a short tournament is very crucial in terms of I don't think it's going to be like the rough and tumble rock'em sock'em hockey out there, but in terms of like you want a little grit.
Yeah.
And other than maybe Joel Eriksson-Ek and Adrian Kempe, there's not a ton of grit on that, up and down that lineup. So I understand why a guy like Nyquist is important. But Arvidsson, he was day-to-day like a month ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, that one was
that's one of those merit ones, I think. It's kind of agree to disagree just with the selection committee on that one. But in general, this should be a fun tournament. And I think with USA's projected roster, I'll just go through it just real quick here, then we probably should log off. So the projected USA roster, according to Frank Saravalli, is Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, JT Miller, Matthew Tkachuk, Brady Tkachuk, Kyle Connor, Matt Boldy, Jake Gensel, Jack Hughes, Dylan Larkin, Vincent Trocheck, Chris Kreider, and Brock Nelson up front.
Matt Boldy?
This is the projected roster.
No, that makes me happy. I like Matt Boldy.
Yeah. Yeah, and then on defense, you got Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy, Adam Fox, Zach Werenski. I always pronounce his name wrong. I think it's Jakub Slavin.
Oh, yes.
Is it Jakob or Jake? Do they call him Jacob or Jakob?
I've heard both, actually.
I call him Jakob, so we'll stick with that. Brock Faber, Noah Hannafin. And then for goaltending, Connor Hellebuck, no shock there. Jake Ottinger, Jeremy
No
Swayman.
shock there.
Listen, Team USA is stacked.
Team USA is good.
Far and away, they have the best roster here, and especially they have a goaltending advantage that's, massively outweighing any other team. I think Sweden's got.
I wouldn't count out Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden's got some
tandem excites me. That is intriguing.
Well, even Finland. I mean, they got Saros, they got Lankinen, who's having a good year, and then Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So I think really the goaltending deficient team here is Team Canada. For all the other things that they have going for them. I'm kind of interested to see how that all plays out for them because they have Aiden Hill, Jordan Binnington, and Sam Montembeault. So
no, I'm with you. I'm curious to see if Canada can outscore their goaltending weaknesses.
Yeah, agree. But Team USA, if that's the roster, it's stacked. We'll see what the announcements hold for Canada and Team USA. But that'll do it for today. Hannah, feel better.
Thank you. I can't live like this much longer, Kelsey. Oh my Lord.
Yeah. Well, we commend you for taking the time to come on today and
and I only had one coughing fit, which I really do consider a win. I was sitting here before you pressed record. I was like, please don't let me just be hacking away the entire time.
Yeah, well, you had your tea and everything set up too. So, I mean, you set yourself up pretty well there. But just as a reminder, once again, Kelsey Sermats, you can find me on the Hockey News Pittsburgh Penguins website. You can find me on X at Kelsey_Sermats4. Same thing on Threads, Blue Sky, same thing without the underscore. One more time, Hannah, where can they find you?
Asleep in my bed, hopefully soon. No, I'm Hannah Kirkel. You can read my writing on the Sporting News. You can find me on Twitter at H_Kirk6. I'm on Blue Sky at HKirk6, no underscore, and I'm on Threads at Kirkel6.
Awesome. Yeah, and while Hannah gets some rest in bed, I'm going to be trying to get this podcast out as soon as possible. So hopefully we're not too late on the Four Nations stuff. But anyway, we're signing off.
God, I really hope Evan Bouchard doesn't end up on that roster because that looks real bad for me if he does.
Oh, man. I just, the whole, meltdown we're going to get from the Oilers faithful is
going to be so fun to witness.
Absolutely. And it's already starting to happen. So we'll see. But all right. This is us signing off. Thanks again for joining us. Once again, we'll be back at you every Wednesday. Hopefully we'll have a little bit earlier of an episode next week. But, we get this out when we can on Wednesday, and we appreciate you continuing to tune in on Spotify and on YouTube. So thanks again, Jens. And, stay out of trouble on that.